Hello and namaste, everyone. Today I'm going to talk about Sri Aurobindo as a dramatist and assess his works mainly on the basis of a few plays that he has written. But even these few plays have a lot to offer. There are many issues, themes interwoven into the plots of the plays, and so it is not cannot do justice to everything all at once. So I have selected one major aspect of the plays, one or two major themes which are woven into the plots, and mainly I'm going to show how these plays, political with a political cast, um, actually have also the themes of love and romance uh, interwoven into them. Now, assessing Sri Aurobindo as a dramatist is not an easy task, as his contribution to the genre is quantitatively little compared to his achievements in the fields of poetry, philosophy, or yoga. Now, the task becomes somewhat easier or maybe difficult if we study Sri Aurobindo's dramas in relation to and against the background of his integral philosophy, and attempt to see how they are all of a piece. However, we have constraints also, because there are only five full-length plays left us by Sri Aurobindo and only fragments of few others. And at the very beginning, we must note that these plays belong to his youth, in fact, to the heyday of his political activities. But even in so little a space, we have a lot of variety in setting theme and character, voicing forth his uh, life visions and the ideology of freedom and love through these. Now, dramas by nature are generally rooted in specific cultures, building upon local colors, language, and native tradition, with which the theatre goer can easily identify. And Sri Aurobindo's dramas also we'll see how they are also rooted in different cultural spaces, set in different milieus, built upon traditional history and mythology of different races of the world. Yet the um, the common line connecting them is the philosophy of a higher evolution and liberation from limitations, as he had actually envisaged as a philosopher. What he had envisaged, we have in the dramas too. Thematically, these dramas are a fine blend of mythology and history, tradition and contemporaneity, past and future, the European and the Indian. These are dramas of life and love, of passion and power, reflecting the conflict and change in both individuals and societies against the framework of the political in most cases. The vivid outsides and significant events, to borrow two phrases from Sri Aurobindo himself, are but parts of the drama of the idea power that works itself out in the life movement, lays its hold on the soul's motions, Sri Aurobindo had written himself. Thus, Sri Aurobindo's drama, if we consider it that way, is a drama of the soul, with the soul itself for the real stage, and the audience, which is humanity at large, can easily recognize and identify with. As he wrote in the Future Poetry, and I quote from there, drama is a movement of life and action. And in his own plays, we witness the lives of heroes and their actions of bravery and valor, not only in the outer battlefield of life, but also in the internal world of emotions and passions. Love and politics, among others, are dominant themes. And so now, when we consider the plays, we'll see how the love of politics and the politics of love unfold in these dramas, and how love, in, uh, through and in spite of political schemings, triumphs and transforms the lives of the characters, whether through a delightful tale of romance or a grim tragedy of the soul. We may also note that these works, inspired by the spirit of patriotism or the warm touch of romance, display in good measure the influence of the English Elizabethans and the Indian Kalidas. So maybe we can profit more by reading them as creations of Aurobindo Ghosh, the inspired revolutionary and the would-be Mahayogi, and to look for both prophetic visions and sensual pleasures, all of which we have in abundance in these plays. So when we come to the plays themselves, as we have said, we have five full-length plays, blank verse plays, on the basis of which we may assess his contribution to the field of drama. Um, and even a mere glance at the titles suggests the wide variety in source material and theme. So Perseus the Deliverer is based on a Greek myth. Vasudhatta has an Indian background. Rodogune is a Syrian drama. The Viziers of Basora with its Arabian night locale, and Eric is a Scandinavian romance. So these are the main plays through which we can see what Sri Aurobindo's message was through his dramas. But here, of course, not much to go by if we compare Sri Aurobindo's plays, dramas with his poetry or say philosophy. But even that 1 inch of ivory has a lot of variety to afford. And most of these belong to Sri Aurobindo's early youth. And the one called The Witch of Ilni actually belongs to his Cambridge days in England when he was a student. So, considering the dates of the compositions and the fact that ideas of revolution and freedom preoccupied the mind of young Aurobindo, it is not surprising that most of the dramas have a political frame and cast and may be read as plays political with love and romance woven into the texture of the plots and leaving a message of spiritual significance at the end. In fact, pre-independence Indian literature was a powerful means of protest and revolt against the oppressive and aggressive structure of colonialism, and theatre was no exception to this. So, in a way, we may consider Sri Aurobindo's dramas as part of the theatre of protest, conforming to the tradition of anti colonial writing on the one hand, while on the other, looking forward to the spiritually regenerated future, which makes these politically charged writings exceed the limitations of contemporary and contextual politics as they are vibrant with the eternal message of freedom and reconstruction. It's true that Sri Aurobindo delved deep into the mythological reservoirs of the world, but his is nowhere a mere mythological reproduction, but a reconfiguring of his political ideology and exploration of the psychological motives of human behavior through themes mythical or historical. So these dramas of Aurobindo Ghosh, the nationalist revolutionary, do have their own note of love and harmony, along with the ideals of freedom and liberation and redemption played out on the stage of the human mind by characters who are typal, individual, and also evolving and become mythical political symbols of the old and the new, of evil and good, of captivity and deliverance. For instance, look at the play Perseus the Deliverer, where the main theme is deliverance. It is suggested by the title itself, and the deliverance of Andromeda, of the captive merchants, in fact, of the whole of Syria from ignorance, tamas, um, uh, superstition, slavery, delivering the Syrians from Poseidon's and Polydon's rule, and thereby freeing the spirit from ancient bondage. And Sri Aurobindo's message in these plays, and also later on, we have the same message from him, that is He's trying to tell us through the plays, through the characters, that we have to get rid of the enemy within our own ignorance, egoism, sloth, and lethargy. And Sri Aurobindo, the revolutionary, had loudly voiced and exposed the faults of his countrymen, uh, fellow Indians, in his journalistic writings during the freedom struggle. And the same note of indictment as in the Bande Mataram writings we have in these words of Andromeda when she speaks against the tamasic nature of man and the resistance of man. And I quote from the play, she's saying, I do not pity tigers, wolves, and scorpions. I pity men who are weak and beasts that suffer. In fact, according to Sri Aurobindo in The Ideal of Human Unity, and I quote an extract from that, the communal mass is always conservative and static in its consciousness and only moves slowly in the tardy process of subconscious nature. The free individual is the conscious progressive. It is only when he is able to impart his own creative and mobile consciousness to the mass that a progressive society becomes possible. And in characters like Perseus, Andromeda, Iolus, Eric, Hertha, or Anis and Nuruddin, we have such free and progressive spirits who can help in the process of transformation. Because the aim is to uproot the cruel, cold injustice of centuries, to free the people from organized terror, madness, and fear. As we see in the Viziers of Basora also, the rule of Zaini and Almoin must end and yield the place to Alfazal and Nuruddin. In the fragment piece, The Prince of Edur also, we have the prototype of the fiery revolutionary in the character called Bappa. And he is also a deliverer. And we hear the mighty Bappa utter these words. He's saying, we are warriors, Rajput, two ways of meeting only fit for us, by mutual sweet attraction undenied, or else with lion leap to seize our bride and pluck her from the strong protecting spears, taking her heart by violence. Now, look at these words. They are full of the fiery energy of the Rajput warrior himself, and no meekness, no submission, no weakness anywhere. And what we have here, look at these words, the lion leap, and taking the heart by violence. Now, the fiery spirit of do or die reverberates through these words. But love, true and divine, is never denied its supreme place in Sri Aurobindo's philosophy. But any kind of slavery and servile allegiance to unjust rule came in for the sharpest criticism and denouncement from the fiery spirit of Sri Aurobindo. And he is advocating what he is advocating through his plays, through his journalistic writings, and even later on is force and power of the Rajput, the Rajasic Shakti, which was needed for decolonization of the mind, the psyche, and the nation. And Sri Aurobindo believed that in a state of servitude, political or otherwise, freedom and progress were not possible. He also shows us how baser political ambitions and strategies are defeated by the higher passions and values of life. As we see in Rodogune, Antiochus renounces his claim to the throne, thereby ending the civil rivalry with his brother when he falls in love. His proud dreams of sitting on Syria's puissant throne and loud acclamation of the greed for political power is heard in these exultant words where he's saying, it is divinity on earth to be a king, but he meets his Waterloo at last when power, love, and life all end and pride goes before a fall. And in these words, where we see him uttering before his death, my kingdom rides to me. This is sadly overturned when he actually meets his tragic death. Failures, that scheming politician from the same play, as Sri Aurobindo says, is a rare study of evil, of the evil mind, as is Polydion of Perseus the Deliverer. And these symbolize the subtle Satan whose rule has to end and give place to the higher powers of love, light, grace, and wisdom. So, in politics, as in other spheres of life, Sri Aurobindo's message was the evil must be slain, be it the scheming politician, or the political leader, or the king himself. As Sri Aurobindo says in one of his unfinished pieces, The Prince of Mathura, and I quote, a lying king, tortuous and serpentine in policy, loses as much by the distrust he breeds as all his shufflings gain. Now, Sri Aurobindo was writing about in his dramas kings and emperors and kingdoms and empires. But look at these words. They are so very relevant. And I suppose at this moment in time, it is even more relevant for a democracy like ours. Because this is the message which every power seeking politician must remember, that power cannot be sustained long on mistrust or distrust. So this shows how keen an observer in politics Sri Aurobindo was. And also he gives us the psychological motives with which these powers work and for which these powers work. And he also prophesies the end they are going to meet. In Vasudetta also we see how the political ambitions of Mahasen are thwarted when he takes recourse to guile and deceit to take Udayan captive in Ujjaini's golden groves. His cunning scheme of joining war with wedlock to whet his own political ambitions recoils on itself when Udayan becomes, instead and in spite of a political prisoner, a prisoner to love, a prisoner to Vasavdatta's charms and passions. In another play, Eric, called Eric, Eric, the protagonist, is depicted more as a lover, which is as powerful a role as that of king and statesman. And Hertha, another important character from the play, is such a scheming mind that any lover of peace would covet. And in this play, Sri Aurobindo says, he has written, the political strategy of finding out the enemy's weakness and strike accordingly gives wondrous results in establishing a reign of peace over that of military power. Now, why is it so? It is a scheming, shrewd policy of shrewd politicians, but it succeeds because it is used by the wise, it is used with wisdom. And he says, wisdom, strength, and policy alone are sure, but only when directed towards achieving a nation's happiness. And that is why all of Hertha's schemes succeed. This can only be when power, strength, and rajasic energy combine with love and grace. And what is completely left out of any scheme is weakness of any kind, because that is and never was a virtue. So, as we witness the sad case of King Cepheus in Perseus the Deliverer, though who, in spite of being a good king, cannot actively fight evil in his kingdom and would have cried aloud, like Alzain of the viziers of Basora, my throne is tumbling down, had he and his imperial line not been saved by Perseus. Now, death for one's country is noble, but never meek submission to foreign rule, which holds the mind, the psyche, and the nation in bondage. And it was equally bad to be a victim of blind superstitions, irrational beliefs, worn out customs, and rituals. And Sri Aurobindo's message, even through these early plays, early works, is to rid oneself of these and fight for freedom, for one's own self as well as for the motherland. and he was certainly asking his countrymen to take up the role of Perseus and deliver both themselves and the country from bondage. His message was very clear in this play as in others, to fight actively the evil within and without, as Andromeda does, and on no account should the motherland be sacrificed. As we see in the play Vasavdatta, Udayan, like a true leader and king, will not pawn his Kosambi at any cost because it belongs not to himself alone, but, as he says, to many other souls. So, two major themes at least are woven into the context of these stories, which help the plots of the dramas to advance. Captivity, chaos, and turmoil, and redemption from this condition, both on the individual and at the symbolic level, representing the condition of colonized India, is one major theme throughout the plays, which almost all have a political slant. And the other major theme may be taken to be the defeat of evil, which retards and holds in check the evolutionary urge of man for the higher, the better, and the happier. Thus, we find slavery and colonization represented in major ways in the dramas of Sri Aurobindo. For instance, in Perseus the Deliverer, where Syrians are slaves of both their external and inner enemies, no less than in the Viziers of Basora or Rodogune or even Vasavdatta, we see a display of the psychosocial conditions of the characters and their surroundings. The Viziers of Basora especially deals with the slave trade of slavery, and the memorable and lovable Anis Algelis is one such slave girl who helps to redeem the conditions of Basora and is redeemed herself in turn, while Rodogune, the captive slave, meets her liberation only in death. Vasavdatta deals with this theme in a very subtle way, cloaked under the subject of the imperialistic lust for power, which is, of course, defeated, and the prisoner slave Udayan sets himself and Vasavdatta both free. Because Mahasen, Vasavdatta's father, knows that Udayan's senses are enamored slaves to the touch of every beautiful thing. And he also knows that his daughter Vasavdatta is very beautiful. And so it's very convenient for him to plan the marriage of his daughter with Udayan for securing political gains for himself. But that fortunately transforms into a marriage of and for love, a union of two loving souls, restoring honor and dignity to both individuals and their kingdoms. In The Prince of Edur also, such a scheme of political marriage is planned when Karan declares, and look at his words, uh, he's saying, "What is it but a daughter, one mere girl, and in exchange an emperor for my ally? It must be done." Now, look at the motive, the lust for political power. It has reached uh, an extreme measure that all common natural bonds are broken, subdued under this. And here we particularly see what is the message. If a father can do this, why not scheming politicians who have only their own interests to consider? So in these words, what we find, see, the father in Ranakaran is killed, is destroyed, and what emerges of his character is only the pleasure seeking emperor. Okay, so look at the motive, the psychological motive behind this. And this is how Sri Aurobindo has arranged the plots. But everywhere we see these schemes fail and the characters are redeemed by the higher powers of love and grace. In a similar way, in Eric, The Princess Aslog, disguised as a dancing girl, turns upon her own resolution to murder Eric and becomes a slave to her own passions, which nevertheless sets them both free for their onward journey to peace and harmony. Likewise, the kingly policy of Andromeda's and Phineus's marriage is annulled when Perseus arrives on the scene. So all the slaves we see in the dramas of Sri Aurobindo are redeemed from captivity in Sri Aurobindo's enlarged vision, and the reign of ignorance and falsehood also comes to an end. Now, we may draw a cluster of characters from these plays who represent deceit, treachery, wickedness, and evil in various measures. And in all the dramas, we see the period of evil and horror and turmoil is followed by one of renewal and resurrected surroundings. So we see these characters like Polydion, Humber, Almoin, Phelus belong to that group representing that element in the socio-political structure which has to be eliminated. With the defeat and curbing of the cunning and the wicked, say in Phelus or Almoin, uh, we see individuals, societies, and empires how they are redeemed, how they are saved. Evil is crushed and sins are punished. And as Nuruddin in The Viziers of Basora says, it is man's folly to think we sin our pleasant sins and then refrain and think that God's deceived. But God is not deceived. God waits for the ripe hour to reward us according to our acts. And as Dunya from the same play realizes that God is keen eyed for our petty sins, that is, even the petty sins are punished. But the great offenses and high criminals also do not go unpunished. Thus, Syria, Basora, Norway, Avanti, these stages are all battlegrounds for the confrontation and clash of opposite forces and powers, where we witness the destruction and fall of Asuric and Satanic forces. Perhaps the best staged drama displaying the crumbling of evil is witnessed in Perseus the Deliverer when Polydon meets his end. In his last moments, Faustus like, we hear him cry out in anguish, I am abandoned to my evil self. I am gone. I am taken. I see black hell, the knives, fire pointed, touch my breast. Now, this is so dramatically staged, and even if we are just reading aloud these lines and picturing to ourselves how by and by Polydon is getting defeated and he's dying, it leaves us with a sense of relief. The evil power is so strong, and he is destroyed, he dies, and as Aeolus says, he is ended, his own evil has destroyed him. Thus, evil is its own cause of destruction, and with the end of the Posidonian Polydeian rule, the morning sun breaks over Syria. And in other plays also, we have the same scene. As Nicanor says in Rodogune, the storm visited, bolt shattered house must be rebuilt. And all the plays we see move forward towards progress and individual and social transformation, freeing the people from bondage. Andromeda and Rodogune find their liberation, and the direct and unveiled symbolic significance here is the vision of a free country. And likewise, Syria, Norway, Kosambi, all are restored to peace and harmony. Even Baghdad, that holy city in the viziers of Basora, is not free from its lurking Ibrahims. And so Anis and Nuruddin must come back to Basora, other than the one they had left, a resurrected Basora. So, in and through all these dramas of conflict emerges the idea of liberation and freedom from social, political, and psychological bondage and slavery. Now, think of it, political freedom itself spells a kind of transformation from a state of colonization to self rule, and it forms the background and a prelude to further higher and a spiritual transformation. And later on, Sri Aurobindo wrote in The Ideal of Human Unity that is, social or political unity, I'm quoting, is only worth pursuing insofar as it provides a means and a framework for a better, richer, more happy, and puissant individual and collective life. And this is, as Perseus also says, one forward step, and little by little, earth must open to heaven. And now, if we are wondering about the relevance of the theme and message of these works written more than a century ago, we may recall and repeat Perseus' last words from his final speech, or Perseus' final speech, where he says, "But the blind nether forces still have power." And who can deny the truth of these words after more than a century since the time these words were uttered by a character in Sri Aurobindo's play? Yes, we do feel the power of the nether forces. They are still with us. And we may remind ourselves also of the great dramatist Shakespeare's All the World's a Stage philosophy to find a contemporary context for the plot and character and settings of Sri Aurobindo's plays, which transcend the barriers of being mere pages in a text or stages set in mythological historical times. We still have our scheming politicians who know how to pluck their own good from the storm of civic trouble, like Phineas. We still have our civil wars, translated probably as rivalries for political parties for power. We still indulge in slave trade and human trafficking, and misuse of political power is very normal. And for that matter, Cepheus town, that colonized city of Syria, we can build anywhere, anytime. In fact, we are existing in a state of colonization even today. For who can say he is completely free or has attained the final liberation? Now, chronologically and historically, we may feel that the period of colonialism or imperialism is over, but it's not that. These forces still abide, they still govern us in various ways. So, the ancient quarrels still abide, evil against good, politics against democracy and religion, brute force against wisdom, and the moves and countermoves of imperialistic forces which make mere pawns of the common man and the poorer nations. Yet, the evolutionary urge it is that propels us on, and though, as Perseus says, the ascent is slow, we still shall attain the higher states of consciousness and be redeemed by love and divine grace. And this is what Sri Aurobindo's plays tell us. This is the message that they give us. And this is what Sri Aurobindo has shown us in his live dramas. How evil retreats when love becomes the guiding force, and when characters like Andromeda, Hertha, Aslog, Anis, Nuruddin, Vasavdatta, Antiochus respond to this power and to the evolutionary drive which helps them rise above the limitations of political pride and ambition and transform themselves to lead the socio-political march towards progress. And this saving grace and power, Sri Aurobindo has invested mainly in his women characters. Of course, his male characters, the heroes, are heroic and courageous and brave. But there is something else which must be added to this bravery, and that power to transform, the power to love, to redeem. It is there in a better measure in his women characters. and almost all of his women characters, except one or two, exhibit noble virtues and emerge victorious and transformed in the end. So it is that his plays are richly dyed in the hues of love and romance, which twist their strong ways into and through the maze of politics and strife. Thus, the rich and sensuous Arabian Nights locale of the Viziers of Bassora, in which the love of Anis Nuruddin flourishes, delights us no less than the mesh of the love triangle with its merry songs in The Witch of Ilni, or the romantic love of the Maid in the Mill, or the romantic action of Eric. The love of Andromeda and Perseus, or Sidone and Aeolus, or that of Vasudetta and Udayan charm us, and even the tra- even the tragic tale of Rodogune Antiochus has a cathartic effect on our minds because we know that even in death the victory is that of love. And in a world where a springing laurel like Aeolus dwells, fed upon sunlight by the murmuring waters, or Andromeda's delightful smile greets the guest, where exists the grace and passion of Rodogune, or the beauty and captivating charm of Vasavdatta, Avanti's golden princess, that is surely a world more full of beauty than we can dream of, as Aeolus tells Perseus. So for a while we may forget the lurking evil, the ominous dark, the wicked and the cruel, and take delight in life, knowing that the severe shall come and the heavenly grace descend. For Sri Aurobindo says, is not mere sunlight something, and to breathe a joy. Now, very, very relevant in particularly in today's critical juncture when people are dropping dead on all sides. So we know that to see the morning sun every day spells life and the grace of God. So that is the message of Sri Aurobindo, the great message of love and life and hope. Now, so do we think or do we feel we strike a different, a contradictory note here, which is maybe very unlike Sri Aurobindo, who weaves the plots of his plays upon tales of horror and heroism and ignorance and valor? Of course not, because see, love and romance and an uncoyed display of passion is characteristically Aurobindonian because he was writing dramas of life with all its opposing and conflicting events, and nothing here can be left out of account. Treachery, deceit, and wickedness must be balanced by love, strength, and grace. Thus exclaims the pleasure seeking Udayan in Vasavdatta. Oh, earth is honey, let me taste her all. It is the bittersweet taste of honey that we enjoy in Sri Aurobindo's plays. Whether it's the Orsino like Udayan, or the passionate Rodogune, or Andromeda dreaming of her sun god, we see all lovers participating in the feast of will and the feast of May, whether in the forest or the seashore or inside the royal prison. And the Shakespeare-like songs interspersed through the plays, as in The Viziers of Bassorah, or Eric, or Witch of Ilni, or Vasavdatta, underline the love romance motive and the need for the power which will defy death and fate. And as audience, and as I said before, even if we are just reading these printed words on a page, as audience, we are awakened to the power of love when we hear Aslok singing, love is the hoop of the gods, hearts to combine. Love is divine. Or again, when she says, when love desires love, then love is born. And we do wait for the birth of this miracle called love. And when love is born, true love is born, it becomes an act of surrender. This we know from one of Anis's songs in The Viziers of Bassorah. And I quote what she's singing. King of my heart, wilt thou adore me? Call me goddess, call me thine. I too will bow myself before thee as in a shrine, till we with mutual adoration and holy earth defeating passion do really grow divine. Or as in Ismenia's imploring words to Antonio in The Maid in the Mill, where she saying, then you must take me, as I have given myself to you, your servant, yours wholly. So this is the kind of love which Sri Aurobindo was depicting even in his early works. And to these lovers, bewitched with happiness, Sri Aurobindo says, the earth is environed with a sacred light. As Udayan says, love is sweet enough though unreturned. Love, we see, is self existent, sustained by its own power, and love abides, whether the reward is betrayal and fierce hatred, as Andromeda feels, or Cleopatra's love for her sons, which ends wretchedly. And in Vasavdatta, Sri Aurobindo tells us to lavish upon all men love and trust shows the heart's royalty. So, in these dramas of love, we become willing participants, as the stage is not only the Syria of romance, but the heart of every human who has experienced the conflicts of passion. And we remain like Andromeda, willingly remain like Andromeda, chained to love, and become eager eavesdroppers to the romantic rendezvous of the passionate display of love, whether in fond kissings or addressing the beloved in endearing language, as when Antiochus says, so heave against me like a wave forever, melt warmly into my bosom like the spring, or as Aslak sings, my heart desires eternity in an embrace. Or when the music lover Udayan, having tasted the nectar of love, admits song is divine, but more divine is love. And with plays like The Maid in the Mill or The Witch of Ilney, with an Elizabethan cast, we stop thinking of the revolutionary and the philosopher for a little while and take sheer pleasure in the drama which delights our senses. And when Brigida says, tomorrow's sunlight shall see it staged, scened, enacted, and concluded, we do wish we could see this play concluded with its abundance of wit, humor, romance, and love, but unfortunately left unfinished. So it is a celebration of love and life that Sri Aurobindo's characters stage. And even if the lovers suffer initially, they are rewarded with a happy union in the end, as we see in Perseus the Deliverer, or the Viziers of Basora, or Eric, or Vasudhatta. And what Anis in the Viziers of Basora confesses to herself may be taken as a fate of love and all lovers. And she says, my heart beats reassuringly within. The destined prince will come, and all bad spells be broken. The destined prince does come to liberate or to abduct and bind in the chain of love, which itself is a redemption. And the dramas do end in the triumph of love, which is the divine power needed for the evolutionary progress and restoration of peace and harmony, and for combating evil and ignorance. It is the mightiest thing on earth, and as Eric says, it moves even the gods whose deathless hearts are melted to the pang and rapture. So, through the lives and actions of these characters, Sri Aurobindo shows us how the leap of love is across the abyss of hate. And Sri Aurobindo also shows us how individuals progress from the lower to the higher through self realization, and in turn help the social evolution too, giving us a vision of regenerated humanity. And we hear in these words of the hero Eric one profound truth of human life that Sri Aurobindo believed in. And I quote, he's saying, strength in the nature, wisdom in the mind, love in the heart, complete the trinity of glorious manhood. So the Sri Aurobindo insists on strength and wisdom combined with love, and he presents in his dramas great ideals, which, through his interpretative visions and the lively cast of characters, becomes living in their appeal and significance. Though most of the plays weave tales of war, valor, and heroism against a political canvas, yet Sri Aurobindo's final message given in these early creations may be taken to be what he makes Hertha say in Eric: not blood, but peace; not death, you gods, but life; but tranquil sweetness. And today, again, how very, very relevant in today's context these words are when we are meeting a spectacle of death all around. And do we not sincerely wish that this may come true for us too? And this prayer may be granted at a time when the whole world is seething and reeling under the unknown daggers of opponents and also horrors of our own making. This is where Sri Aurobindo's dramas outgrow their limitations of time and space and history and culture and become eternally relevant as dramas of life vision and poetic inspiration, to take a phrase from K.D. Setnam. And we may justly say that Sri Aurobindo was not merely carrying forward the tradition of Elizabethan drama. He was doing much, much more than that. Though in the very early pieces we do find the influence of Elizabethans and Shakespeare in good measure, but we have only to compare a Cambridge work like The Witch of Ilni with, say, Vasavdatta to see the evolution and the immense difference in language and theme. And we may also add that Sri Aurobindo's audience is not the regular theatre goer, but anyone and everyone who can relate to life's varied experiences as depicted in the dramas. They take us through mythical to colonial to contemporary times, breaking through the limitations of what we call closet drama and set up a real theatre for a live audience anywhere and anytime. Old themes and legends upon which Sri Aurobindo's dramas are based get impregnated with new meanings and vision, and Sri Aurobindo comes to us as a creative artist, a writer of dramas, more than a mere playwright. Now, this distinction is according to Sri Aurobindo's own theory. Though in my talk I have used the words drama and play synonymously, but Sri Aurobindo does draw a distinction between uh, an actual work of art, which he calls dramas, uh, from, say, a mere playwriting. And he also feels that historical accuracy may be dispensed with, and one has to expand and deal creatively with characters and events in a drama. These are Sri Aurobindo's own words. An outward action in a drama is only a symbol of the psychological. And in the future poetry, Sri Aurobindo wrote, and I'm quoting one extract from the future poetry. He said, drama is the poet's vision of some part of the world act in the life of the human soul, and at its highest point it becomes a poetic rendering or illustration of the Aeschylean Drashanti Pathen. The doer shall feel the effect of his act in an inner as well as an outer, a happy no less than an austere significance. Thus, even when the young Aurobindo Ghosh had politics and liberation foremost on his mind, his works reflect his philosophy of world transformation and evolution too, as we see in as early a work as the 1907 composition Perseus the Deliverer. Through the Cepheus Perseus dialogue, Sri Aurobindo gives us his philosophy of spiritual evolution, and the spiritual connotations of the idea of release and liberation are made visible in other plays also. And Sri Aurobindo's enlightened vision reassures our troubled mind when Athene promises that through the shocks of difficulty and death, man shall attain his godhead, and gives us hope of experiencing that tranquil hour of victory for which the whole earth is waiting. So, this is a very this is an analysis of Sri Aurobindo's dramas. And to conclude this very, very brief analysis of Sri Aurobindo, the dramatist, we may say in conclusion, uh, whether we consider these works as that of a conscientious artist, weaving curious weft of eerie tales. This is also uh, borrowed from Sri Aurobindo himself, or as part of the literature of decolonization. These dramas transcend their contemporary relevance, offering us the eternal message of truth, and come to us as original works of art, as what we see here is the human soul in action. Thank you.